Before China built aircraft carriers, before it became the world's second-largest economy, before China versus United States dominated headlines, the strategy to contain it was already in place. Most people assume the United States began containing China when China became a global power. But containment started decades earlier. It began when China was poor, internally unstable, diplomatically isolated, and militarily limited. To understand this strategy, we need to return to 1949. When Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China, Washington interpreted the event through the lens of a broader ideological struggle. The Cold War had already taken shape in Europe. The Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan signaled a commitment to containing Soviet expansion. NATO would soon formalize that commitment across the Atlantic. But Asia presented a different challenge. China was not simply another country turning communist. It was the most populous nation in the world. Its geographic scale alone meant that its political alignment would reshape the balance of power in the Pacific. American officials spoke of the loss of China. That phrase was not only political rhetoric, it reflected genuine strategic anxiety. If Beijing aligned closely with Moscow, the Communist bloc would stretch across Eurasia. The Soviet Union would gain strategic depth. East Asia could tilt away from American influence. The concern was not that China would immediately invade its neighbors. In 1949, China was exhausted from decades of civil war and Japanese occupation. Its economy was shattered, its infrastructure weak, its military largely agrarian. The concern was momentum. If newly independent or fragile states across Asia believed the communist model was ascendant, political alignments might shift rapidly. Influence spreads faster than armies. The United States, therefore, made a choice that would define the region for generations. It would not attempt to conquer China. It would shape the environment around it. The first decision was Japan. After World War II, the United States faced two options. It could permanently weaken Japan to prevent renewed aggression, or it could rebuild Japan as a stable industrial partner. Washington chose reconstruction. Under American occupation, Japan adopted democratic institutions, economic reforms, and a pacifist constitution. In 1951, the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty formalized a long-term military presence. American forces would remain on Japanese soil, and Japan would align strategically with Washington. This was not just a bilateral agreement. It was a structural anchor. Japan would become the economic engine of East Asia under American protection. Then came Korea. In 1950, North Korea invaded the South with backing from Moscow and Beijing. The Korean War was brutal and inconclusive. It ended with an armistice rather than victory. But from a strategic standpoint, it achieved a clear objective. South Korea survived. The peninsula remained divided, preventing the entire territory from aligning with China. American troops remained stationed there. Over time, South Korea evolved from a fragile state into a major industrial economy, deeply integrated into the U.S.-led system. Next was Taiwan. When Chiang Kai-shek's forces retreated to the island after losing the Chinese Civil War, the question was whether the United States would defend it. In 1950, President Truman ordered the 7th Fleet into the Taiwan Strait. This decision froze the military situation. Beijing could not take Taiwan without risking direct conflict with the United States. Taiwan became both a symbol and a strategic outpost. It also occupied a critical geographic position along the so-called First Island Chain, a series of territories stretching from Japan down through the Philippines. Geography mattered enormously. China's eastern coastline faced a maritime corridor dominated by American alliances and naval presence, while China remained a continental power focused on land threats and internal consolidation. The United States secured the surrounding sea lanes. Control of the seas meant control of trade, and trade would define the second layer of containment. Across Southeast Asia, the United States strengthened partnerships with the Philippines, supported regional security frameworks, and later expanded diplomatic engagement with states concerned about Chinese or Soviet influence. Even when alliances were informal, the pattern was consistent: reinforce governments that aligned with Washington and integrate them into a broader economic system. This network did not form overnight. It evolved across decades. But by the late 1950s, a clear structure had emerged. Japan in the north, South Korea below, Taiwan offshore, the Philippines further south, American naval dominance across the Pacific. This arc limited China's ability to project power outward. It also reassured regional actors that aligning with the United States provided security and economic opportunity. While China experienced internal campaigns such as the Great Leap Forward and later the Cultural Revolution, much of East Asia followed a different trajectory. Japan industrialized rapidly. South Korea and Taiwan began export-driven development. Singapore and other Southeast Asian states embraced global trade. They grew inside a system protected by American naval power. China, by contrast, remained largely excluded from that system during the Mao era. Its economy was centralized and insulated, its diplomatic relationships limited, its military focused primarily on land defense. Containment during this period was not aggressive encirclement in the sense of imminent invasion. It was strategic positioning. The United States ensured that the most economically dynamic zones in the region would not fall under Beijing's influence. Then came an unexpected development. By the late 1960s, relations between China and the Soviet Union deteriorated dramatically. Border clashes erupted. Ideological rivalry intensified. The communist bloc fractured. For American strategists, this changed the equation. Instead of confronting a unified communist front, Washington could exploit divisions. The logic of balance of power returned. In 1972, President Richard Nixon traveled to Beijing. This move shocked the world, but it did not dismantle the containment structure. The U.S.-Japan alliance remained intact. American troops stayed in South Korea. Taiwan retained security commitments. Naval dominance persisted. What changed was diplomatic posture. The United States began integrating China gradually into the international system. After Mao's death and Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms, in 1978, China opened to foreign investment and export markets. Factories multiplied along the coast. Special economic zones attracted capital. Global supply chains expanded. China's growth accelerated inside a maritime system still influenced heavily by the United States. This produced a paradox. The network built to constrain China's strategic expansion also provided the stability that allowed China's economic rise. Sea lanes remained open. Regional markets remained accessible. Financial systems functioned under rules shaped largely by Western institutions. As long as China's military capabilities remained limited, this arrangement created a form of equilibrium. Economic integration reduced immediate confrontation, while the security perimeter remained unchanged, but economic growth eventually translated into strategic ambition. By the early 21st century, China had developed a modernizing navy, invested in advanced missile systems, and expanded its presence in the South China Sea. Artificial islands were constructed, maritime claims asserted. Taiwan again became a focal point of tension. Yet the original architecture still stood. American forces remained in Japan. South Korea hosted U.S. troops. The Philippines renewed defense cooperation. Australia deepened military coordination. The structure created in the early Cold War proved durable. It survived the collapse of the Soviet Union. It adapted to shifting economic realities. It now confronts a China far stronger than the one it was designed to contain. The key insight is this: containment was never a single dramatic act. It was cumulative construction, treaties signed, bases established, naval routes secured, industrial partners strengthened, economic interdependence reinforced. By the time China began its rapid ascent, the surrounding environment had already been shaped for decades. Strategy is often invisible when it is successful. It does not announce itself with spectacle. It embeds itself in geography, institutions, and expectations. The United States did not wait for China to become powerful before responding. It anticipated the possibility of long-term rivalry and positioned itself accordingly. Whether that architecture can withstand future pressures remains uncertain, but its origins are clear. The effort to contain China did not begin when China rose. It began when China was still rebuilding from revolution, and by the time the rise became undeniable, the network around it was already firmly in place. If you want to understand today's tensions in the Pacific, you have to understand the architecture built decades ago. Because the real contest between great powers is not decided when everyone is watching. It is decided when the system is being built. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the strategies that shaped the modern world. See you soon.